What would you do if your company was 90 days away from running out of cash? In 1997, that's what Apple was up against. Once a tech darling, they were losing market share, bleeding money, and on the very verge of collapse. You see, if you've ever built a 6, 7, or even 8-figure business, you know it's not just about the numbers. It's your identity. It's proof that you've built a dream that works. But here's what nobody tells you. You can be making 6 figures, 7 figures, or even 8 figures and still be one bad month away from disaster. It starts with that quiet fear, That fear you don't tell your clients, you don't tell your team, you don't even tell your family. I mean, think about it. You've got invoices that went out, but no one's paying fast enough. Payroll is coming. Rent for where your company is residing is due. You're sitting there lying awake in your bed at like 2 a.m. doing math in your head. If I move this here, if I pay them late, maybe I can cover that. All right? Then comes the dreaded shame. Because on the outside, you're still successful. People think you're living the life. You're still posting wins on social media, but inside, you're terrified, absolutely terrified they'll find out. And they'll find out that you're not as in control as you look. And then there's the pressure. I mean, can y'all feel it? The pressure. Every email feels like bad news. Every phone call from your accountant, that's if you even have one, makes your stomach drop. You start making decisions from a place of panic, chasing quick wins, saying yes to clients you shouldn't, cutting deals that don't fit your vision just to survive another month. Here's the truth that no one says out loud. Earning 6, 7, or even 8 figures in your business doesn't mean that your business is safe. It just means that the stakes are higher when you fall. And so Apple in 1997, you got to understand, they were around $2 to $3 billion in market share, and they were on the verge of collapse. Apple had lost billions. They had a bloated product lineup. They were like literally weeks from bankruptcy. And then a single strategic decision flipped the script. Okay? My question is, what would you do if you had been in this situation, or if you have been in this situation, and if you have made it successfully on the other side? Tell me in the comments what you did to get out of this situation. And if you've never been in this situation, in your mind, what would you do? What would you do? If you see me looking over here, it's because I can see the chat. And for those that are joining me live, I want to hear your comments. What would you do in this situation? So let's go back to Apple. Their funding lifeline literally came from an unexpected source, okay? And we're gonna unpack that. Their unexpected source was $150 million of investment funds from, guess who? Dun, dun, dun. You guessed it. Microsoft. Oh, Microsoft. You see, Steve Jobs struck a surprising deal with Apple's biggest rival. Microsoft bought $150 million in non-voting Apple shares, agreeing to hold them for 3 years. Now, here's the question. Why would a competitor do this? Wouldn't it have been awesome if Apple died? Then Microsoft would be the giant ruling the world. Why would Microsoft partner with Apple like this? And my question to you is, if you were Microsoft, would you have done this? That's the question. Would you save your competitor from utter destruction? Would you? What is in it? What is in it for you if you were to save your competitor from utter destruction? Let's just be real. But I want you to know, let's not get this twisted, okay? This was not a charity case. Gates is a businessman, period, okay? So let me explain what Microsoft got out of the deal. You see, Microsoft needed Apple to stay alive to avoid monopoly charges. Yes, those monopoly charges. And Apple needed the cash to stay afloat. Do we get it? So the deal included also a commitment from Microsoft to keep developing the Office suite for Mac. And that would ensure Apple's computers staying relevant in the business and education sector. Okay? So let's talk about how this deal affected Jobs and Apple publicly. Because there was definitely an element of shame and public humiliation around Apple's 1997 Microsoft deal, especially in the eyes of Apple's loyal fan base and the tech press. Like, why did it feel shameful at the time? Picture it. Picture it with me right now. It's July 1997. Steve Jobs has just returned to Apple, a company 90 days away from running out of cash. The Macworld stage is packed with loyal Apple fans, the kind who would bleed 6 colors for that rainbow logo, right? They're expecting the return of the rebel leader, the one who will take down the big bad empire, Microsoft. Picture it. But instead, Steve steps out on a stage and says the unthinkable. We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. And then it happens. On the giant screen behind him, Bill Gates' face fills the room, larger than life, beaming in via satellite. The crowd gasps. Then the boos start. It's not that polite disapproval. It's betrayal. They'd come to see a rescue, and they're watching what feels like surrender. What they didn't know was that Apple was weeks away from shutting its doors. What they didn't see was that this was $150 million from Microsoft. It wasn't a white flag. It was a lifeline. Okay? A deal that would buy Apple the time it needed to focus, rebuild, and eventually become the most valuable company in the world. You see, in that moment, Jobs had to stand there in front of all the boos, the shame, the headlines, and choose strategy over ego. Woo-wee! I'm going to say that one more time. He had to choose strategy over ego. Because sometimes the only way to save the kingdom is to make peace with the king you swore you never bow to. Let that sink in. Let's just sit in that moment, shall we? Now, here's the thing. Apple's shame was on a stage in front of the world. But yours might be quieter. There may not be boos, in your background. There may not be any headlines. But it sure feels just as loud in your own head. You see, running a 6, 7, or 8-figure business, but the bank account doesn't match the image, clients may think that you're thriving. Your family sees the social media post. They don't see you staring at your numbers at 2 a.m., wondering if you can make payroll. They don't hear that little voice saying, I thought we were past this. And just like Steve Jobs, you might be facing decisions that feel like surrender. Taking on a client you swore you'd never work with, cutting a deal that doesn't feel like your brand, making a move that on the outside looks like weakness, when in reality, it's the only way to buy yourself time to rebuild. The truth is, whether you're a billion-dollar brand or a 6-figure business, survival isn't always glamorous, okay? And we need to understand that. Sometimes it's strategic. And sometimes the move that feels like the most shameful is actually the smartest. Now, where do we see a similar situation play out in Scripture? Because as much as I love a good case study, which we just reviewed, I always like to see how it plays out in Scripture. You see, many of us believe that we should not be unequally yoked with one another. Many of us include that maxim in our business dealings as well. However, there have been plenty of times in Scripture where a man and a woman, or a woman of God, has partnered with the so-called enemy, okay? Nehemiah was one of those people. Nehemiah was a Jewish exile, and his king at the time was King Artaxerxes of Persia. And King Artaxerxes of Persia had a position of trust and influence. One day, Nehemiah had a visit from a brother, Hananiah, and he's from Judah, and he told him the distressing news that Jerusalem's walls were broken down and its gates were burned with fire. You can find this in Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, okay? This left the city defenseless and its people vulnerable, deeply grieved, because when you hear bad news, it really can hit you where it hurts, okay? So Nehemiah wept, he fasted, he prayed for several days. And when Nehemiah finally appeared before the king noticed his sadness, which, believe it or not, culturally in those times, that was a risky moment. Because since showing sorrow before the king, that could actually be dangerous. Anyway, Nehemiah was able to explain the situation because the king asked, why are you so sorrowful? And so Nehemiah explained that the city of his ancestors was lying in ruins, okay? So then the king asked Nehemiah, what did he want? Now, it's so funny when we're given an opportunity, how many of us fumble? How many of us are like, I don't know, how do I explain this? What should I say? Well, Nehemiah shot a quick prayer up to God, okay? And he asked for wisdom, and then he made a bold request. He asked for permission to go to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall. He needed letters of safe passage through the provinces. He needed a letter to the keeper of the king's forest to supply timber for the gates and the walls. And guess what? The king granted everything he asked for, because the gracious hand of my God was upon me. And you can find that in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 8. He even sent an army of officers and cavalry for Nehemiah's protection. With the king's full backing, resources, and political protection, Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem. He inspected the walls secretly at night, rallied the people, organized the rebuilding effort despite intense opposition. And the wall was completed in just 52 days. Again, you can find this in Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15. Now, When we read this story, we think praise be to God in the highest, and we are sounding testimonial praise and clapping our hands and woohoo and yays. But I need you to understand something very, very crucial about this, because there was still some shame and stigma to this whole ordeal. You see, you have to understand that partnering with the king meant aligning, at least temporarily, with the power that has oppressed Nehemiah's people. Okay? Others would accuse him of compromise or betrayal. There could also be a fear of perception. His community might see this as making deals with the enemy instead of trusting God. Hello, somebody, how many of us have dealt with that? Okay? If the king had said no to Nehemiah's request, Nehemiah would have risked the position and possibly his life. Because it's like, how dare you approach the king in that way? The other part to think about is by accepting the king's help, Nehemiah would have to work within the king's terms. After all, it's his funds, it's his resources. So every great company, and this is something I need us to all come to grips with. Every great company has had to face this similar crossroad. Do we keep grinding until we collapse? Or do we make the bold move that saves us? You see, Apple had 90 days left. That's all he had left, y'all. 90 days. Nehemiah faced it when the walls of Jerusalem lay in ruins, and the only way forward was to ask the king, the very one who ruled over the people, for help. I need you to understand that this is not easy. And if this is what you're going through, I totally understand. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. But guess what? It may be the move that is needed. For Nehemiah's sake, it was the move that secured the resources, the protection, and the authority to finish the work. And he was able to do it and accomplish it in just 52 days. Now, here you are, staring at your own decision. And you have to understand the real difference between burnout and breakthrough at this moment isn't how hard you work. It's how wisely you're choosing in the moment. The only question is, will you see the move before it's too late? Let me know in the comments your thoughts about this discussion. And also, if you have enjoyed this discussion, remember to like, subscribe, share with a fellow business owner that needs to hear this, and hit that notification bell, okay? So you can be here for the next time we go live. But until then, have an awesome, awesome rest of your day. Contact me if you need me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.